What if the most feared predators in the galaxy weren't looking for a fight, but for something only we could give them? What if the universe's most terrifying truth wasn't about an alien invasion, but about an alien surrender? You felt it, haven't you? That gnawing feeling. Ever wondered why your effort doesn't equal your results? You pour every ounce of your soul, your passion, your dedication into your work, your relationships, your life, only to be met with misunderstanding, suspicion, or worse, indifference. You possess a strength, a depth, a unique spark that you know is valuable, yet the world seems to fear it, or simply fails to see it at all. It's a profound and lonely ache to be so thoroughly misjudged. Humanity felt that exact same ache, not in an office or a quiet room, but on a galactic stage, surrounded by 1,000 alien races who had already made up their minds about us. They saw us as primitive, emotional, chaotic upstarts. They were wrong, and their mistake was about to change the history of the stars forever. In this story, we will journey to the edge of known space and into the heart of a galactic mystery. We are going to uncover the real reason why the Cathar, the interstellar beasts that haunt the nightmares of empires, laid down their bioplasma claws and offered their unwavering trust to humankind. And in their story, a story of misunderstood power and desperate hope, you might just discover the key to your own untapped potential. You will learn how to recognize the spark within that others overlook, and understand that what they perceive as your weakness might just be your most profound, world-altering strength. The Galactic Consortium had a simple, elegant name for the Cathar, the Great Devourers. It was a name earned over centuries of relentless, terrifying expansion. Entire star systems would fall silent, their distress calls ending in a wet, tearing static that left little to the imagination. The Cathar were biological nightmares, behemoths of chitinous armor, bristling with razor-sharp claws that could shred starship hulls. They moved in swarms that blotted out suns, communicating in subsonic frequencies that could liquefy the internal organs of most sentient species. They never negotiated. They never took prisoners. They only consumed. The Consortium, a sprawling, ancient bureaucracy of 1,000 different species, had been fighting a losing war against them for generations. Their fleets of chrome warships and crystalline energy weapons were met with biological savagery that adapted faster than their strategists could think. The Cathar were, by every conceivable metric, the apex predators of the galaxy. They were the ultimate expression of evolutionary violence. So when the scout ship, Wanderer, a tiny, obsolete human vessel on a long-range survey mission, stumbled into a Cathar nesting system by a 1 in a trillion navigational error, the Consortium wrote it off as another tragic loss. They prepared to update their maps, marking another system as a tombstone. They monitored the Wanderer's final, panicked transmissions. They heard the proximity alarms shriek. They saw the energy readings of a Cathar matriarch, a creature the size of a small moon detaching from the central asteroid hive. The Consortium analysts leaned back in their chairs, a grim, familiar ritual. This was the end. But then something impossible happened. The screaming stopped. The alarms fell silent. The human captain, a woman named Eva Rostova, ordered her comms officer to open a ship-wide external broadcast, a foolish, pointless gesture, the analysts thought. A final, defiant prayer to an uncaring void. But what came through the speakers wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a scream. It was a song. An old human lullaby, something from Earth's forgotten history, sung in a clear, steady voice. And on the Wanderer's forward view screen, the Cathar matriarch, the great devourer that had personally shattered fleets, the monster from the galactic abyss, stopped. It floated in the silent dark, its countless crimson eyes fixed on the tiny human ship. And then, in a gesture that broke every known law of xenobiology and galactic warfare, it slowly, deliberately retracted its claws. It lowered its massive, armored head. It bowed. That single act of submission sent a shockwave through the Galactic Consortium that was more devastating than any superweapon. Their entire understanding of the universe was shattered. The galaxy's most savage monster had just shown deference to its weakest, newest member. The question that echoed from the core worlds to the outer rim was deafening in its simplicity. Why? What did we have that they could possibly want or respect? The Consortium's greatest minds, its strategists and its scientists, were utterly stumped. They saw the event as an anomaly, a trick, a precursor to some new, unimaginable horror. They couldn't comprehend it because their entire philosophy was built on a fatal assumption. That power is measured in firepower, that strength is the ability to dominate. They saw a predator and its prey. They couldn't see the truth. They couldn't see that the Cathar weren't looking for a victim. They were looking for a savior. And they found one in the most unlikely place imaginable. To understand the Cathar, you must first unlearn everything you think you know about predators. We, as humans, tend to project our own fears onto the unknown. We see teeth and claws and assume malice. We see strength and assume a desire to conquer. The Cathar were indeed predators, honed by millions of years of evolution in a brutal, unforgiving home system. Their biology was a symphony of lethality. Their chitinous plating could deflect tactical-grade lasers. Their metabolisms could process almost any organic or inorganic matter for fuel. Their pack-mind tactics were so complex and fluid that they seemed almost precognitive. They were, in every sense of the word, survivors. But survival over cosmic timescales comes at a cost. Evolution is not a benevolent force guiding a species to perfection. It is a blind, ruthless tinkerer, favoring whatever works in the moment. For the Cathar, the traits that ensured their dominance were aggression, unity of purpose, and a collective consciousness that submerged the individual into the will of the hive. There was no I among the Cathar, only we. This unity made them an unstoppable force, a wave of singular intent. But it was also a cage. Over countless generations, their genetic code, once a vibrant tapestry of possibility, began to fray. The very traits that made them strong began to calcify. They had perfected the art of the hunt, the science of war, but they had lost something essential along the way. Spontaneity, individuality, the capacity for dissent, for illogical hope, for the quiet internal rebellion that leads to true innovation. Their evolution had led them to a glorious, powerful, and utterly stagnant dead end. They were a species suffering from a kind of spiritual entropy, a genetic sorrow that echoed through their silent, subsonic communion. Their relentless expansion across the galaxy wasn't driven by hunger for territory or resources, not truly. It was a desperate, instinctual search. They were lashing out, not in anger, but in pain. A deep, existential agony they themselves couldn't fully articulate. They were a species with a phantom limb. They could feel the space where something vital used to be, and the emptiness was driving them mad. They would encounter new species, beautiful and diverse like the crystalline Silans or the gaseous Medusans, and they would analyze them with cold, biological precision. They would scan their genetics, their neural patterns, their energy signatures, looking for the missing piece. And when they found nothing but the same predictable patterns of life, logic, instinct, survival, they would move on, leaving destruction in their wake, their silent scream of frustration echoing in the void. They were not devouring worlds. They were dissecting them, searching for an answer to a question they couldn't even form. They were the galaxy's most tragic figures, kings of a poisoned kingdom, trapped in their own perfect, suffocating strength. And then they found us. Humanity burst onto the galactic scene like a chaotic, unpredictable variable in a perfectly balanced equation. We were a mess. Our technology was a patchwork of elegant designs and brute force engineering. Our societies were a cacophony of conflicting ideologies. Our history was a litany of self-inflicted wounds and miraculous recoveries. To the ancient, orderly races of the galactic consortium, we were infants, primitives throwing tantrums in the cosmic nursery. Our emotions, in particular, were seen as a profound weakness. Our capacity for grief, for rage, for irrational joy, for self-sacrificing love, these were viewed as dangerous instabilities, flaws in our design. The consortium races had long ago purged such messy variables from their own genomes, favoring cold logic and calculated efficiency. They saw our art, our music, our stories, not as strengths, but as the quaint, useless artifacts of a species not yet mature enough to understand the universe as it truly was. A cold, hard, mathematical problem to be solved. They couldn't have been more wrong. When the Cathar matriarch encountered the scout ship Wanderer, its ancient, weary consciousness did something it hadn't done in millennia. It listened. It felt. It bypassed the ship's engines, its weapon signatures, its metallic shell. It focused on the strange, vibrant, chaotic energy emanating from the fragile beings inside, and what it found stunned it into stillness. It found Eva Rostova's fear, yes, a primal, understandable terror. But beneath the fear, it found a stubborn resolve. It felt her grief for the crew she knew she was about to lose. It felt her love for the family she left behind on a distant blue world. It felt her desperate, illogical hope. And as she began to sing that ancient lullaby, the matriarch felt something else, something it hadn't encountered in a million years of searching. It felt a signal that was not unified, not coherent, not logical. It was a beautiful, unpredictable storm of individual consciousnesses, each one a unique universe of thought and feeling, yet all connected by invisible threads of empathy. This was the spark within. It wasn't a superpower. It wasn't a weapon. It was a fundamental property of our being. Our DNA, unlike the perfected, streamlined code of the elder races, is a chaotic jumble of history. It's filled with dormant genes, evolutionary cul-de-sacs, and vast, unexplored territories of potential. This genetic messiness is the source of our greatest weakness and our most profound strength. It makes us susceptible to disease and division, but it also gives us an unparalleled capacity for adaptation and, most importantly, for empathy. We can look at another being and for a fleeting moment feel what they feel. We can connect. Our emotions aren't a flaw, they are a different kind of data processing, a form of perception that transcends simple logic. The Cathar, in their state of genetic stagnation, recognized this immediately. Our chaotic spark was the antithesis of their rigid order. It was the missing chord in their silent, sorrowful song. It was a potential cure for their racial soul sickness. They didn't see a weak, primitive species. They saw a mirror image of what they had lost. They saw a path back to wholeness. The matriarch's bow was not an act of surrender. It was an act of profound, desperate reverence. It was the galaxy's most powerful patient finding the only doctor who could diagnose its illness. And that doctor was a terrified human captain, armed with nothing but a lullaby and a heart full of messy, beautiful human feelings. The consortium saw a lamb before the slaughter. The Cathar saw a key. The reaction from the Galactic Consortium was, predictably, one of disbelief followed by paranoia. The event aboard the Wanderer, which came to be known as the Rostova Silence, was classified at the highest levels. The official narrative was that the ship had been destroyed. But truth, in an interconnected galaxy, is a fluid thing. Whispers turned into rumors, rumors into encrypted data packets traded in the shadowy corners of the galactic web. The story of the human ship that sang a monster to sleep was too potent, too strange, to remain hidden for long. The consortium's High Council convened in an emergency session in their shimmering citadel on the capital world of Axion. The chamber was a grand amphitheater, filled with beings of every shape and form. There was the crystalline praetor of the Silan Ascendancy, his thoughts echoing like chimes. There was the gelatinous overmind of the Medusan Collective, floating in its nutrient tank, its consciousness a network of pure logic. And presiding over them all was Chancellor Valerius of the Ethelgard, a being who appeared almost human, but whose species had guided their own evolution for eons, purging all sentimentality, achieving a state of cold, detached perfection. To them, humanity was a problem to be managed. The Rostova Silence was an unacceptable variable. Their military commander, a hulking, four-armed warrior of the Xylos race named General Korg, argued for a swift, decisive solution. "The Cathar are feigning," he boomed, his voice like grinding stone. "This is a new form of psychological warfare. They are attempting to use the primitives' emotional instability against us. The humans are now a vector for infection, a Trojan horse. I propose we quarantine their entire home system. Sol must be contained before this spark they carry contaminates us all." His logic was, from the consortium's perspective, flawless. The Cathar are the enemy. The humans have interacted with the enemy in a way we don't understand. Therefore, the humans are now a threat. It was simple, clean, and utterly devoid of curiosity. They were trying to solve a spiritual problem with a military solution. But one voice spoke against the tide of fear. Ambassador Aris Thorn, humanity's representative, was a man who looked tired and out of place in the gleaming hall of demigods. He was a historian by trade, not a diplomat, chosen for his deep understanding of humanity's own tumultuous past. He stood, his simple cloth robes a stark contrast to the shimmering energy fields and polished chrome around him. "Chancellor, members of the Council," he began, his voice calm but firm. "You are making a fatal assumption. You assume the Cathar's motivations are the same as yours: conquest, resource acquisition, strategic advantage. You look at them and see a weapon. We looked at them, and we saw pain. A ripple of derisive energy flowed through the chamber. The praetor of the Scylan ascendancy chimed, "Pain, ambassador. The great devourers who have extinguished 1,000 suns feel pain. Your species' anthropomorphism is a well-documented flaw." Thorn met his gaze. "Is it? Or is your inability to conceive of it your flaw? You speak of our emotions as a liability. You pride yourselves on your logic, your detachment. But your logic has led you to a century of unwinnable war. Your detachment has prevented you from asking the most basic, most important question. Why? Why are they doing this? We don't claim to have the answer yet. But the event aboard the Wanderer suggests that the answer is not found in a tactical display, but in connection, in communication, in the very thing you dismiss as our greatest weakness." Chancellor Valerius leaned forward, his face an unreadable mask of placid perfection. "And what do you propose, Ambassador Thorn? That we send poets and musicians to meet their fleets? That we attempt to empathize with a biological plague?" "I propose," Thorn said, his voice ringing with a conviction that silenced the chamber, "that you let us try, give us a ship, a single unarmed vessel. Let us go to them not as soldiers but as scholars, as doctors. Let us try to understand before you condemn. What do you have to lose? Another fleet? You're losing those already, but you might just gain an understanding that could save us all." The council was stunned into silence. Thorn's proposal was absurd, illogical, and deeply, offensively human. It went against every strategic doctrine and political protocol the consortium had ever devised. Yet in the face of their own repeated failures, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. The image of the bowing matriarch was burned into their collective memory. It was a puzzle they could not solve. Reluctantly, with 1,000 conditions, and under the watchful eye of a Xylo's military escort, the council agreed. They would allow the humans their foolish, sentimental quest. They saw it as a way to gather more data before the inevitable extermination. They had no idea they had just sanctioned the beginning of a revolution that would unravel their entire empire. The mission was codenamed Project Chimera. The ship they were given was the Resilience, an old diplomatic cruiser, stripped of its weapons and retrofitted with advanced sensory and communication suites. Its crew was not comprised of soldiers, but of humanity's best and brightest minds in unconventional fields. Dr. Lena Petrova, a xenolinguist who specialized in nonverbal communication and biological resonance. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a geneticist whose radical theories on emotional impact on DNA had gotten him ostracized from mainstream science. And leading them, of course, was Ambassador Aris Thorn, the historian who believed the key to the future was buried in the past. Their destination was a system deep in the Cathar's territory, a place the consortium called the Maw. It was where the matriarch from the Rostova Silence was believed to nest. The journey was tense. The Xylo's escort ship, the Iron Fist, kept its distance, its commander, General Korg's protege, viewing the Resilience and its crew with open contempt. To them, this was a fool's errand, a suicide mission sanctioned by weak-willed politicians. As they entered the Maw, the universe seemed to change. The light from distant stars was swallowed by vast, swirling nebulas of organic matter. The silence of space was replaced by a low, persistent, subsonic hum that vibrated through the hull of the ship, the collective consciousness of the Cathar. It was a sound of immense, ancient loneliness. Dr. Petrova was the first to feel it clearly. She had hooked herself into a sensory rig of her own design, a device that translated the subsonic frequencies into a cascade of abstract images and raw emotion. "It's not aggression," she whispered, her eyes wide with awe and horror. "It's a lament, a great, unified chorus of grief. They're broadcasting their own extinction, and they don't even know it." They found the matriarch orbiting a cracked, lifeless planet. She was immense, a living mountain of dark chitin and glowing red eyes. Her swarm, thousands of smaller Cathar, moved around her in a slow, hypnotic ballet. The Iron Fist immediately powered its weapons, its commander demanding that the Resilience withdraw. Ambassador Thorn ignored him. He ordered his comms officer to do exactly what Captain Rostova had done. He opened a channel, but he didn't play a lullaby, he broadcast something else, something Kenji Tanaka had prepared. It was a complex signal, a data stream containing the full, uncensored history of humanity, our wars, our plagues, our famines, our moments of cruelty, and our acts of inexplicable kindness, our art, our science, our philosophies, our greatest triumphs and our most shameful failures. It was a broadcast of pure, unadulterated, chaotic humanity. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The subsonic lament from the Cathar swarm faltered. The matriarch's massive head tilted, her countless eyes focusing on the small ship. The broadcast continued, a torrent of information and emotion. It showed a mother grieving for a lost child, a scientist having a eureka moment, a soldier sharing his rations with an enemy, a couple falling in love. It was a signal of pure, beautiful mess. And then a new signal came back from the matriarch. It wasn't subsonic. It was a focused psychic projection, a wave of images and feelings that flooded the minds of everyone on the Resilience's bridge. They saw a vision of the Cathar's past, a vibrant, verdant world. They saw the Cathar as they once were, smaller, more diverse individuals with unique thoughts and feelings. They saw them laugh and play and create. It was a vision of a paradise lost. Then the vision soured. They saw the Great Unification, a moment in their history where, to survive a cosmic catastrophe, they had deliberately merged their consciousnesses, sacrificing individuality for collective strength. They had saved their species, but they had damned it at the same time. The psychic vision showed them generations passing, their genetic code simplifying, their art disappearing, their emotions fading into a single, monotonous hum of survival. They showed the human crew their internal void, the gaping wound in their collective soul. The vision ended, and the bridge of the Resilience was silent, the crew weeping openly. They weren't just observing a hostile alien species anymore. They were bearing witness to a tragedy on a cosmic scale. Dr. Tanaka, his face pale, turned to Thorne. "They're trapped," he breathed. "Their evolution is a one-way street. They can't go back. The genetic pathways for individuality have been dormant for so long, they've effectively been erased. Their aggression, it's like a body racked with a fever. A symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. They are lashing out at the universe because they can't fix what's broken inside them." "And our signal," Thorne murmured, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Our chaos, our emotional spectrum, it's a map. It's a template for what they've lost. Our spark resonates with the ghost of their former selves." At that moment, the commander of the Iron Fist hailed them, his voice apoplectic with rage. "What have you done? Our deep-range sensors are picking up a massive energy surge from the matriarch. She's preparing to attack. Withdraw now, that is a direct order." Thorne looked at the view screen. The matriarch was indeed glowing, but it wasn't the energy signature of a weapon. It was something else. A smaller Cathar, a drone about the size of a fighter craft, detached from the swarm and approached the Resilience. It was damaged, one of its claws shattered, leaking viscous fluid into the void. "Hold your fire," Thorne commanded his own crew, his heart pounding. "Do not raise shields." The Xylo's commander screamed over the comms. "Are you insane? It's a suicide run." The damaged Cathar drone didn't attack. It drifted slowly towards the human ship, its movements sluggish and pained. It stopped just a few meters from the main viewport. It was broadcasting a single, repeating feeling: help. This was the moment of truth. Every protocol, every instinct for self-preservation screamed to run. But Thorne and his crew were thinking with a different part of their being now. They were thinking with their humanity. "Open the main cargo bay," Thorne said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Let it in." The decision to bring a wounded Cathar drone aboard the Resilience was an act of faith so profound it bordered on madness. On the Iron Fist, the Xylo's commander watched in slack-jawed disbelief, convinced he was witnessing the final, suicidal act of a species too foolish to survive in a hostile galaxy. He logged the event, preparing a scathing report for the Consortium High Council on the complete failure of Project Chimera. He was already composing the eulogy for Ambassador Thorne and his crew of sentimental dreamers. Inside the Resilience, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of terror and awe. The cargo bay, a vast, sterile chamber, was repressurized. The massive outer doors slid open, and the wounded Cathar drifted inside, its movements clumsy in the artificial gravity. It was even more intimidating up close. Its chitinous hide was a latticework of scars and bioluminescent patterns. the air filled with an alien scent of ozone and cold earth. The creature settled onto the deck with a heavy thud, its one good claw scrabbling for purchase, its many smaller limbs twitching. The wound on its other side was grievous, a gaping hole leaking pale, shimmering hemolymph. Dr. Tanaka and a team of medics, clad in environmental suits, approached it cautiously. They carried not weapons, but diagnostic tools and medical equipment. The Cathar drone remained perfectly still, its multifaceted eyes tracking their every move. The only sound was the hum of the ship's life support and the ragged, shallow breathing of the medics. Tanaka knelt beside the wound. He didn't begin by scanning or probing. He simply placed a gloved hand on the creature's carapace a few inches from the injury. It was a simple, universal gesture, one of reassurance, of presence. Through the suit, he could feel a faint vibration, a tremor of what felt like fear or perhaps anticipation. The Cathar drone did not flinch. It did not attack. It remained utterly still, a patient submitting to a doctor. For hours, Tanaka and his team worked. They learned that the Cathar's biology was incredibly complex, part silicon, part carbon, with a circulatory system that functioned more like a liquid crystal computer. Their conventional medical techniques were useless. They had to improvise, to innovate on the fly, combining human medical principles with the fragmented psychic information the matriarch had shared with them. They weren't just healing a wound. They were trying to understand a new form of life from the inside out. The breakthrough came not from a medical scanner, but from Dr. Petrova. She stood at the edge of the bay, her sensory rig feeding her a stream of the drone's emotional state. "It's not just physical pain," she said, her voice strained. "There's confusion, a dissonance. Its body is trying to heal, but its connection to the hive mind is scrambled. The collective will is telling it that injury is weakness, that it should perish. But some other instinct, something deeper, is fighting back. It's an individual for the first time in its life, and it's terrified." Tanaka understood. The hive mind that gave them their strength in numbers was now a poison to the individual. To heal the body, they first had to soothe the mind. On a hunch, he asked the ship's computer to play music into the cargo bay. Not a lullaby this time, but a complex classical piece. A symphony full of soaring highs and melancholic lows, a piece that celebrated the full, messy spectrum of emotion. As the music filled the bay, something miraculous happened. The Cathar drone, which had been tense and rigid, relaxed. The frantic twitching of its limbs slowed. Its internal vibrations, which Petrova had described as a scream of static, began to cohere into a calmer, more regular rhythm. The chaotic hive mind signal was being drowned out by the structured chaos of human art. It was as if the music was reminding the drone's ancient, dormant genes of what it was like to feel something singular, something personal. With the drone's mind now calm, its body began to respond. Its incredible regenerative abilities, once suppressed by the hive's fatalistic programming, kicked into high gear. The team watched in amazement as tissues began to knit themselves back together, the shimmering hemolymph slowing to a stop. They were not healing it. They were simply creating the conditions for it to heal itself. They were treating the whole being, not just the wound. When the drone was finally stable, it did something that would be talked about for centuries. It slowly, carefully extended its one good claw, not in a threatening gesture, but with the claw tips retracted, offering the flat, armored back of its hand. It was a gesture of trust, of gratitude. Dr. Tanaka, after a moment's hesitation, removed his glove and placed his bare hand against the cool, smooth surface of the alien's claw. In that moment of contact, a circuit was completed. A new kind of psychic message flowed from the drone, not to the hive mind, but directly to every human in the room. It was not a grand vision of the past, but a simple, profound feeling, acceptance, and with it a name, not a designation, not a number, but a personal identifier, a sense of I. The first individual Cathar in a million years had just been born, midwifed by human compassion and a classical symphony. Aboard the Iron Fist, the Xylo's commander was receiving frantic reports from his sensor technicians. "Sir, the energy signature from the matriarch has changed again. It's broadcasting on a new frequency, not subsonic. It's a complex wave, almost like a language." The consortium had spent a century trying to decipher Cathar communication and failed. The crew of the Resilience had done it in a day, not with technology, but with trust. So we've seen how the galaxy's most feared predators were not monsters, but a species in profound agony. We've seen how a single act of human empathy aboard the Wanderer shattered a century of military doctrine. And now we've witnessed a team of human scientists and thinkers do the impossible. Connect with and heal a Cathar, helping it rediscover a long-lost piece of itself. But this is just the beginning. The birth of one individual is a miracle, but can it save an entire species? And more importantly, what happens when the galactic consortium, an empire built on order and control, realizes that humanity's chaotic spark is not just a curiosity, but a force capable of rewriting the fundamental laws of the universe? Their fear of the Cathar is about to be replaced by a new, more terrifying fear, a fear of us. The biggest mistake wasn't assuming the Cathar were simple beasts, it was assuming that humanity was. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where you connected with someone, or even an animal, on a level that defied all logic? A silent understanding that passed between you, a feeling of being seen and accepted for exactly who you are, without any words needing to be spoken. That feeling, that spark of pure connection, is what the crew of the Resilience had just shared with a creature the galaxy considered a monster. And that single spark was about to ignite a firestorm. The news of what transpired in the cargo bay of the Resilience spread like wildfire. The Cathar drone, now named Kale by the human crew, a name given to it through a shared sense of psychic understanding, became a bridge. Through Kale, who remained aboard the human ship, the crew began a true dialogue with the matriarch. The communication was slow, laborious, a tapestry woven from psychic images, emotional resonance, and complex mathematical concepts translated through the ship's computer. They learned the full extent of the Cathar's plight. The genetic sorrow was accelerating. Their birth rates were declining. Their young were being born with less and less cognitive complexity, closer to mindless drones than sentient beings. The great unification that had once been their salvation was now, literally, breeding them into extinction. Their aggressive expansion was a blind, frantic search for a genetic catalyst, a way to reawaken the dormant parts of their DNA before it was too late. In humanity, they had found it. Dr. Tanaka, working with the data from Kale's recovery and the information from the matriarch, made a staggering discovery. The human spark, our emotional and genetic chaos, created a kind of resonant field. When a Cathar was exposed to this field, particularly under conditions of trust and non-aggression, it acted like a key, unlocking their own suppressed genetic pathways. Our empathy was, quite literally, a form of gene therapy for them. It didn't change their DNA, but it reactivated what was already there, buried under a million years of rigid conformity. Ambassador Thorne realized the galactic implications immediately. This wasn't just about saving the Cathar. This was about a new form of symbiosis, a partnership that could reshape the future. The Cathar possessed incredible biological technology, an innate understanding of cosmic engineering, and a unified strength that humanity lacked. Humanity possessed the spark of individuality, the creative chaos, the emotional depth that the Cathar desperately needed. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. They were the next step in evolution. He sent his report to the Consortium High Council. It was a document filled with hope, with scientific data, with a plea for a new era of cooperation. He proposed a joint human-Cathar initiative, a chimera program in truth, to begin the slow, careful process of healing the Cathar species while learning from their immense knowledge. The Consortium's response was swift, and it was brutal. Chancellor Valerius saw Thorne's report not as a message of hope, but as a declaration of rebellion. From his perspective of cold, calculated logic, the situation had become infinitely more dangerous. A manageable monster was one thing. A manageable monster allied with an unpredictable, emotionally volatile primitive race was a threat to the established order of the entire galaxy. Humanity had not found a partner. They had acquired a weapon of mass destruction and were claiming they could control it with feelings. It was, to the Chancellor, the height of arrogance and folly. The Silan Praetor argued that the spark was a psychic plague and the humans were its carriers. General Korg's faction claimed it was all an elaborate Cathar deception, and the humans were their willing puppets. The consensus was clear. The human experiment had to be terminated. Project Chimera was a failure not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. A terse, heavily encrypted message was sent to the Iron Fist, and the rest of the Xylo's Third Fleet, which had been secretly moved to the edge of the Maw. The order was simple. Sanitize the system, eradicate the Cathar presence, neutralize the human vessel Resilience and its crew, no witnesses. Aboard the Resilience, a sudden, frantic alarm shattered the quiet research. A junior officer on the sensor deck turned to Thorn, his face ashen. "Ambassador, the Iron Fist has powered its main weapon. It's targeting the Matriarch. And, sir, 12 other Xylo's capital ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're surrounding us." The betrayal was cold and absolute. The promise of a scientific mission had been a lie from the start. They were bait, and the trap had just been sprung. Thorn's heart sank. He had naively believed that reason and evidence could prevail over fear. He had been wrong. He opened a channel to the Xylo's commander. "Commander, what is the meaning of this? We are on a sanctioned diplomatic mission." The commander's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mask of grim satisfaction. "Your sanction has been revoked, Ambassador Thorn. By order of the High Council, you and your crew have been designated as collaborators with a Class 1 existential threat. Your spark has been deemed a biological weapon. We are here to perform a necessary sterilization." The words hung in the air, colder than the void outside. Sterilization. The consortium wasn't just going to destroy them. They were going to erase them, pathologize them, turn their greatest strength into a disease. Thorn looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also a burning defiance. They had touched something profound out here in the dark, something true. They would not let it be extinguished by blind prejudice. He looked at the view screen, at the silent, majestic matriarch, surrounded by her swarm. He had led them here to this moment of healing, only to deliver them to an executioner. The weight of that guilt was crushing. But then Kale, the drone they had healed, sent a powerful, calming wave of psychic resolve through the ship. It was followed by a message from the matriarch, broadcast not just to the Resilience, but to the entire Xylo's fleet. It was not a plea. It was not a threat. It was a statement. The images that flooded the minds of the Xylo's warriors were not of war or destruction. It was the image of Dr. Tanaka's bare hand on Kale's claw, the sound of the human symphony filling the cargo bay, the feeling of Kale's mind awakening from its long slumber. It was a broadcast of the healing they had experienced. It was a testament to the connection they had forged. And then the message changed. The matriarch showed the Xylo's fleet what would happen if they attacked. It wasn't a vision of the Cathar fighting back with claws and bioplasma. It was a vision of the Cathar letting them. The entire swarm, including the matriarch herself, would simply cease to be, extinguishing their own life force in a final, silent act of protest. They would die, and they would take the secret of the spark and the potential for their own healing with them, leaving the consortium to its endless, pointless war. But they would do one thing first. They would use the last of their energy to form an impenetrable biological shield around the Resilience, ensuring its survival and escape. They would sacrifice their entire species to save the handful of beings who had shown them kindness. It was an act of love so profound, so illogical, so utterly alien to the Xylo's mindset that it broke their morale. A warrior race could understand fighting to the death. They could understand a strategic retreat. They could not understand a species choosing extinction to protect its friends. The gesture was a weapon more powerful than any torpedo. It attacked not their ships, but their certainty. It forced them to confront the possibility that their entire worldview was wrong. The Xylo's commander stared at his screen, his 4 hands trembling. His orders were clear. But his warrior's honor, a concept he thought was simple, was now a tangled mess. What honor was there in executing a species that refused to fight back, that chose sacrifice over survival? What victory was there in destroying the very thing that showed them such incomprehensible courage? For the first time in his life, he hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, the fate of the galaxy was rewritten. Thorn, seeing the wavering in the commander's eyes, seized the opportunity. "Commander," he broadcast, his voice filled with an authority he didn't know he possessed. "You have a choice. You can follow an order born of fear and ignorance and condemn your own kind to an eternity of war against a phantom. Or you can bear witness to the birth of something new and be the one who tells the galaxy that strength is not about the power to destroy, but the courage to connect. Your choice, right now." The silence that followed stretched for an eternity. The Xylo's commander looked at the Cathar matriarch, a creature he had been trained his whole life to hate. He looked at the tiny, defiant human ship. He looked at his own reflection in the polished console. And he made a decision that would see him court-martialed and branded a traitor, but would also mark him as the first member of the old guard to see the new dawn. He powered down his main weapon, and he opened a channel to the Consortium High Council, not with a report of a successful mission, but with a recording of everything he had just witnessed. The aftermath was chaos. The Galactic Consortium was fractured. The Xylo's commander's testimony, combined with the Resilience's data logs and the powerful, undeniable story of the Cathar's sacrifice, could not be suppressed. Species that had long been resentful of the Ethelguard's cold, logical dominance began to question their leadership. Factions formed. Some sided with the old guard, doubling down on their fear and calling for the extermination of both humanity and the Cathar. But others, a growing number, were captivated by this new philosophy. They were tired of the endless war, of the stagnant, sterile perfection the Consortium offered. The human spark and the Cathar's trust were a sign of a new way forward. Humanity, the primitive upstart, was suddenly at the center of a galactic schism. We hadn't sought this power. We had stumbled into it, armed with nothing but our own messy, flawed, compassionate nature. We had offered trust to an interstellar beast, and in doing so had offered the galaxy a choice: cling to the old ways of fear and control, or embrace a future of connection and symbiosis. The Human-Cathar alliance was formally declared. It was not an empire built on conquest, but a partnership built on mutual need and respect. The Resilience became the first joint embassy, a place where human scientists worked alongside Cathar individuals, for more were awakening every day under the influence of the human crews. The Cathar began to teach us their secrets of biological engineering, showing us how to grow living ships and harness zero-point energy through organic means. In return, we gave them our stories, our art, our music. We gave them back their soul. We learned that day that our greatest evolutionary advantage was not our intelligence or our opposable thumbs. It was our ability to feel, to connect, to see the pain in another and offer comfort instead of a weapon. The spark within, that chaotic, unpredictable core of our being that the elder races dismissed as a flaw, was in fact the most powerful force in the universe. It was the light that the darkness had been searching for. The war with the Consortium wasn't over. In many ways, it had just begun. But it was a different kind of war now, one fought not with lasers and torpedoes, but with ideas and philosophies. It was a war for the soul of the galaxy. And for the first time, we were no longer the underdogs. We were the pioneers of a new age, standing side by side with the very creatures the universe had once feared most. The beasts had offered us their trust, and in accepting it, we had finally discovered our own true potential. We had learned that the greatest power is not held by those who build the highest walls, but by those who have the courage to open the door. The galaxy learned a profound lesson from the story of the Cathar and humankind. It learned that true strength is not found in the sharpest claw or the most powerful fleet, but in the quiet, revolutionary courage to offer trust, to build a bridge across the void of misunderstanding, and to see the divine spark of light within another being, no matter how monstrous their appearance. That story is now etched in the starlight, a permanent testament to our shared potential, a reminder that evolution's greatest leaps are often born from acts of radical empathy. So I will leave you with this to reflect on. What is the misunderstood beast in your own life? What is that person, that situation, or even that part of yourself that you have been conditioned to fear or dismiss? What if it is not looking for a fight? What if, in its own silent, desperate way, it is simply asking for your trust? The answer to that question might not change the galaxy, but it could change your entire world.